Many Christians often end up leaving Christianity due to disappointments, failures, and disagreements they had in their church. Many of these Christians look at their experiences through the lens of bitterness, often seeing that these experiences were just nothing more than a fruitless endeavor. I, on the other hand, as a former Christian, wanted to flip the script today. Joining me is Andy Hawkins to discuss some of our favorite Christian experiences that we had and how they impacted our faith walk. Welcome to Messianic Monday. Hi, my name is Caleb D. Wilson. I believe that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, and welcome back to Messianic Monday. If you please consider hit that subscribe button. I make content educating people about the Jewishness of Jesus, so every subscription really helps. Andy Hawkins, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to be talking about our experiences in Christianity. Now, before we even get into any of that topic, what we should do is define exactly what we're talking about today, Andy. So we're not going to, it's important when we talk about these things, we make sure we clarify that we're not going to give Christianity any credit as far as saying if there was something that we experienced from that was good, we're not going to attribute that to the institution of Christianity, because we would hold that Christianity gets things wrong when it comes from things that are within its own origin of Christianity versus what they stole from Judaism. So it's really important to make that clear so that we don't confuse the idea of, oh, well, if this was a good thing in the Christian experience, then why did you leave that? Well, because we are actually going back to what we would ascribe as the original intention of the apostles, Jesus, and the original institution, which is Judaism. So what we're here to talk about today is we've had experiences within, let's say, Christian circles, or what we would characterize as Christian events, where these events had people who operated under some of these Torah principles, and that we were edified by these experiences. So that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Right.
So,
I think.
sorry, go ahead.
You used you used the phrase "steal from Judaism." I might take just a little bit of issue with that, because if anything, I wish Christianity would steal more from Judaism. I think a better word would be plagiarize, because at least give Judaism credit for what you're doing. But you're correct. Christians are more Torah observant already than they realize that they are.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and that's what I meant when I said steal. Is that yes, they do plagiarize, and I would endorse them to steal it. The only issue I have is when they steal it, don't give credit to Judaism, and will become something that is against Judaism and the principles of Torah and the temple, and we could go into a whole slew of things where the issues come from. So, how about I'll
Right,
start off with.
and I think that.
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna
Well,
start off
anyway,
with one of the things that I think about. Um, I always loved. I don't know if you ever did this, Andy, when you were in church. I always loved it when they would have like the actual cross in church, and like they would have like I think it would be usually like at the end of a sermon said like this, like at the end of the service they would have this thing where they would have a cross, and then you would write out, like you could write out something that you were struggling with, you were upset with, something that somebody did to you. There's a whole slew of things, and then they would have you go up, and then they would have you like nail it to the cross. And for me, it was always so releasing whenever I did that, because it was just
right,
like, okay, Jesus, like for me, it just spoke to me of like, okay, I'm going to trust. It did multiple things. So one, it's like, okay, I'm going to trust that. trust God with this thing. And it also was like, I'm going to pin that anger, that grudge I have with this person, I'm going to nail it to the cross, leave it alone. And it was such a releasing moment for me when I was able to do that. So I always loved when they had those symbolic things because it's funny because when churches do that, it's very symbolic. I mean, the cross is obviously emblematic of Jesus and Jesus' sacrifice, and so it's always interesting to see that like they will do these symbolic things in church, and then they don't recognize the necessity of some of the things in Judaism and their symbolic nature, like engaging in the Passover and the Passover lamb being symbolic of Jesus. It's kind of interesting when it goes into that route where you say, "Oh, well, we can have this cross in church as a symbol of Jesus' sacrifice, but we won't do the Passover because, well, Jesus is the Passover," or something like that.
Right.
It's always kind of interesting when with that logic. But anyways, that was one of the first things I thought of.
Yeah. It's a big misconception. I know like a lot of Christians that if they would just attend a Seder, that they would see that, we in Messianic Judaism, at least a Messianic Jewish Seder, if they went to one of those, we haven't strayed from the cross at all. I mean, that is something that we still hold dear. And, if anything that presents itself as Jewish, even, and if it wants to take you away from the cross, we would oppose that even more than what we do Christianity, right? But I think like what we have to what I really want to get across today myself is that when we say that we have like separate ourselves from Christianity, we are not doing that in a sense of, say, like a Jehovah's Witness that would go, okay, we're excluding Christians from the kingdom of God. We still view Christians as our brothers and sisters in Messiah. We don't like hold ourselves above them in any sense of the word. And if any of us, if you're into Messianic Judaism because some Christian hurt you, and that's the only reason you're into it, you're into Messianic Judaism for the wrong reason. I mean, you should be into it because you see that it's true, not as a knee-jerk reaction to something some Christian did to you. That's just an emotional response, and it's not going to last you very long. I mean, it's the same as you're just making Messianic Judaism another denomination. Oh, well, I've seen people go, well, the Baptists hurt me, so I'm going to come over here and join the Methodist Church. Or, well, they hurt me too, so now I'm going to be Presbyterian. You can't just have a knee-jerk reaction emotionally and go from one thing to the other. You need to find some grounding in the truth somewhere and stay on that and look to that and not to what people are doing. But I mean, I think it'd be helpful if we, like the experience that you just shared, let's point out some that, yeah, we acknowledge Christians do a lot of good in this world. This world would be a much worse place without Christians.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, and I always like to point to when people say, "Do I hate Christians?" I always like to point to the countless martyrs who were operating under Torah principles, who called themselves Christians, who died for the sanctity of Scripture. Like that would be such an insensitive, unfair thing to say, and it's really because my salvation is not built on how much I get right. My salvation is going to be inherited once Jesus comes back to the throne of David. And Jesus is our source of our salvation. Now, when people hear that, they're going to say, "Oh, okay, so then I don't have to try to be right." No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the source salvation is different from your faith. And we know that James says, "Show me your faith by your without your works, and I will show you my faith with my works." And so, like,
Right.
we have to have work. Works are important because they show our faith, and as part of being a disciple is
Hmm.
having a discipline of our religion,
Right.
and our understanding of the tenets of that religion is going to be the source of the proof of how disciplined a disciple we are.
Right. I mean, yeah, I think that's a good point, Caleb. And I'd point out, like, but even with Christians who may hold to a doctrine of faith alone, like sola fide, which I personally don't hold to. If that Christian is still showing their faith by their works, they're good with me. I don't like want to require some kind of doctrinal agreement with me. I'm not going to say that their salvation hinges upon that. That would be wrong. But I'll give you an example. I mean, I grew up in a small country church, and I can think the average age in this church was probably about 104. No, seriously, it was an older congregation, and I was a kid in it. And man, I had like about 40 grandmothers that would look after me, and if somebody in the community got sick or if somebody died, they would bring more food than you could like possibly eat. I mean, what can be more Torah observant than loving your neighbor like that? I mean, you don't get more Torah observant than that. That's the heart of the Torah. That's the Torah and the Spirit working together, right? So, like, I mean, you can't beat that. I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
going to
it's hard to
judge.
beat
I'm not going
food.
to judge. Oh well, now my doctrine is a little different than theirs was. I still have as much love in my heart for them as I ever did. I'll never forget those acts of kindness.
Yeah, yeah, no, that sounds like one of those things where it's like to do good and not to do it, or to know to do good and not do it is sin, and it sounds like they're operating under that as like, I am thankful for people who make food because I mean I can make food, but I wouldn't say it's like my absolute gift of making food, and there's people who just they can just whip something up, and I love food. So
Right, right. And and like when people like when you're like hurting, regardless of the denomination that someone's in, is if someone just says like, okay, I'm not going to let you go through this by yourself. That's a person that has Christ in them. That's a person who is living walking out what Messiah said. You know, it's not. It's not one of the misconceptions in Messianic Judaism is that we have this like checklist of something things to do to be righteous, and we don't. We absolutely don't. We just when we do see like people doing acts of kindness, it's hard. It's hard to like come against that person because they are like they're like the servant. Even if you know, they're like the servant who is actually doing what the master said. And if you go judging them because they don't agree with section 7 paragraph A of your statement of faith, I mean that's ridiculous. It's keeping the commandments of God that counts, right? And I don't want to like I definitely don't have a salvation by some sort of knowledge, or not. That would be Gnosticism. But at the end of the day, like, you know them by their fruit, as Jesus said. And there are many Christians that hold much different doctrine from me, who bear fruit that is just undeniable. They love their neighbor, they love the Lord God, they love Yeshua, Jesus wholeheartedly. I have nothing against them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's worth mentioning in contingent with that is there is a reality. There are some doctrines that it is like you can't, like if you break from that one thing, then it's like that's a big thing. Like we obviously gotta have to believe that Jesus died for our sins, died on a cross.
For sure, yeah, yes,
Like like there's
of
those
course.
things that are absolutely like unnegotiable things. But I think what we're talking about is like small things that's like, if
Yeah,
somebody thinks there's going to be a post rapture versus a pre rapture, like I'm not gonna break fellowship from somebody like
right,
that, you
right.
know?
Yeah, that's a good way to distinguish because somebody could have good works and be, I don't know, a Buddhist or something. Like, there's one God, and you can only come to salvation through the one true God, and that's it. But past that, there are primary doctrines, there are secondary doctrines, and there are tertiary doctrines. My issue is when the people make the tertiary doctrines salvific. That's when it's like, okay, take a look at who the person is. Like, who are they as a human being? And then we could be a little bit more thicker skinned and open to debating these things out without putting judgment on each other. And that goes for Messianic and Christian circles. We we have to be willing to like be able to bounce ideas off of each other and do the iron sharpens iron thing. And but like, again, at the day, who are you to judge another man's servant, right? Don't like judge a person over some tertiary or even a secondary doctrine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got one more moment that I'm thinking of. I remember when, back when I lived in Washington State, there was a worship night at a coffee shop that I went to, and uh, I think it was Bethel that came by. Now, I know there's a lot of people who have issues with Bethel, and perhaps their doctrine is not perfectly sound, all that stuff. And I'm not saying it's not worth getting into ever, but as far as the sake of how it impacted me personally, I'm not going to get into all of that doctrine or whatever that they might espouse. But I went to this worship night, and I remember just sitting there, or standing there, and beautiful worship was going on. And then they started doing um, these what was it called? These words of knowledge, I guess they would call them. And I still remember like the one of the ladies came up to me, and I can't remember what if she said she said to me like, I feel like you're supposed to be the father of many nations, or like the a father to this generation. I think it was one or the other. I forget which one it was, but one of those two statements was what she said to me. And then she took me in front of everybody, and she said it had all the men come up and pray for me. And being, gosh, how old was I? 18, 19, maybe. I just remember like that was a significant moment in my life. I was like, because I had come from what I've come from, and just being like, it just spoke to me so much when she gave me that word, and I thought that was a really cool moment that definitely helped put me on a certain, uh, what would you say, projectivity towards becoming who I am
Right.
today. And so that was one of my favorite moments I can remember.
Yeah. The only thing you can do when somebody speaks something over like that is wait, see if it comes true, right? I mean, like you take a church, like Bethel obviously has its problems. Some of the things they do, are basically occult practices. That's very extremely dangerous. But like, we have to be careful about speaking in these generalizations. If I said, "Oh, Bethel's a cult and everybody in it is damned" or something, that would be wrong because I haven't met everybody in Bethel. Um, there, it's one of those places where you see like a mixture of stuff coming out of it. Is there's good, there's bad, and you have to actually speak to the doctrines and not necessarily go out after the people, unless leadership is a different thing. Leadership, you have to call a false teacher a false teacher. But like as far as like in the congregation, you have to be careful about making generalizations. I used to be the chief of sinners in making generalizations, and it is something I think that the Lord has dealt with me with. um, we have to like be careful not to group everybody together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we have to be careful to think about our words and the one dimensionality that our words can have, where we have black and white. And I think we've had a couple conversations, and I won't mention specifics, but over the past couple of days, we've definitely had a lot of conversations um, with a lot of people about this very thing of like, we can have it can be very easy to make these black and white statements about people and organizations. And what I've come to find is there a lot of things are really not as black and white as we make them out to be. And part of me, my journey coming to Messianic Judaism has been me realizing things are a lot more complicated than we make them out to be. Like people can do the right things for the wrong reasons and do the wrong things for the right reasons. And
Yeah,
if we placate that,
yeah,
like
exactly.
that's everyone's wrong if they do a wrong thing, everyone's right if they do the right thing. It's dangerous.
Yeah, if one thing that there's one thing Messianic Judaism has taught me is nuance. That there are nuances to different things. Um, I think it has helped teach me that to be very careful about absolute statements because I used to be so this is black, this is white, and it you had to be very careful about that. There are and that's why, like in our group that we study with, I love how we bounce things off of each other. How about this? How about that? And we have some pretty heated arguments sometimes, but at the end of the day, everybody walks away better for it. And we know that we've learned to not take things personally, take things in stride. That the person I'm arguing with who's coming against what I think is trying to strengthen me and I'm trying to strengthen them. If you can get into a community where you have that, I mean, there's no substitute for that. Like when I know somebody, when you disagree with me, Caleb, you and I've had like arguments. I know every time you argue with me that you have my best interest, and I hope you know the same for me. Right? That's a given, so we don't have to like get into that. Well, he's insulting me as a personal slight. That's one thing that Messianic Judaism has done for me. I have learned to do that. Uh, but like, I think that's one thing I would tell the Christian listening to this is like, you know, if you hear anything else on Caleb's podcast that goes against the doctrine that you hold dear, you know, everybody in our group, everybody that we know, we actually have your best interests in mind, whether you agree with us or not. We want all of us to have as much real estate as possible in the kingdom, right? we want everybody to come we want everybody to go forward. We want everybody to prosper. We want everybody to like come to some kind of peace and brotherhood with us. And it's not, there's no personal attack. We do call people out on here, Caleb, especially you like, next week you'll have a guy on here like, okay, this is a dangerous teacher. But what you have in mind is the followers, right? You want to call attention to some of the things that are going on, and it's for their best interest. And even for the false teacher, hopefully he wakes up, right? Hopefully he quits doing things that are going to anger God.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, this morning I thought about like what a pleasure and honor it is to be. Now, I might be biased because I'm part of the ministry that I'm going to be speaking of, but that's okay. I love that our ministry just feels like there's momentum within the ministry that we're part of. And what I really love is I really I really love that like I can if I hear something or I see something I don't think is right, not that I'm going to should be a jerk about it and you know be bombastic, but I'm glad I can just say I don't understand this. I don't know why you're saying this and it sounds wrong. Could you please show me how it's right? Like that's one of the most frustrating things for me is when I can't just say as simple as possible without any bombastic language. I think you're wrong. I think that you are incorrect, and I want you to prove to
Right.
me that you're right. And so I think it's
Right.
just been such a blessing.
I've been on the group in the middle of an argument, and I've gotten in the middle of it, and I go, the pride, starts to come in, and all of a sudden I go, oh crap, I'm the one wrong. I think I have to like concede this argument because, and you know what? And I come away from it going, you know what? I learned something, and that's a good thing. That is always a good thing. So I might have to like, I don't have to hold on to every doctrine that I have. As I learn, I'm going to have to let go of stuff, and I've learned that like I have to let go of things that like that as I'm learning that, okay, there's another way to look at this thing, or I have to adjust some things. Okay, well, I wasn't completely right on that. And you have to like let the pride go, and say, okay, I'm definitely in the wrong here. Something as I've gotten older, I've learned to do more.
Yeah, and I love the freedom in that I can say confidently like I don't understand this and I think it's wrong, and then I have other people who are just as willing to explain it in words that make sense, and then we can either we can come to consensus about what's going on in the conversation and what is the sound doctrine. And to me that just seems to be the only way to get down to brass tacks of like what do we do about these things, and just the ability and the willingness modeled by the ministry, just being able to have that openness is just it's like people don't understand what they're missing out on. Like there's so much blessing being reaped from being able to learn from these conversations.
Right. It just it's some place you have to get in a circle of people who disagree with you. Um, you'll get more out of that than just listening to someone give a lecture, whether that be a pastor or a rabbi. You have to have resistance to grow stronger. You don't get stronger by swimming downstream. You get stronger by swimming against the current sometimes. And even in our group, sometimes we'll take the opposite stance, even if we don't believe it, just to see what the other person will do. So, like, it's you have to have resistance to grow. There's no other way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Andy, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I think it's been a really great discussion. Thanks for so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.